They say no one remembers the moment they fall asleep, but tonight you just might. Good evening, friends. I'm Mr. Narratory. If you're here, it means the day is done and the quiet has finally arrived. Tell me, what time is it where you are right now? And what's your favorite way to end the day? If these stories bring you peace, consider subscribing, liking, or sharing them with someone who needs a little calm. Now, let's begin. The Clockmaker's Garden. You wouldn't notice the shop unless you were walking slowly, very slowly, and happened to glance down a quiet side street where the pavement turns to cobblestone and the buildings lean toward each other like old friends sharing secrets. The sign is simple. Clockmaker, painted in fading gold above a deep blue door. The windows are small, fogged slightly from the inside, and behind the glass you can see the delicate outlines of timepieces resting on wooden shelves. I came upon it by accident, or so I thought at the time. But the truth is, you don't find this place unless you need to. Not urgently, not desperately, just deeply enough that even your shadow has started looking for somewhere to soften. I stepped through the door, and the scent of warm wood, old pages, and metal polished by hand wrapped around me like a coat that already knew my shape. There was no bell, just a soft tick, and another, and another. Hundreds of them, layered like raindrops falling onto calm water. The light was amber, gentle, the kind that doesn't ask your eyes to adjust, just lets them relax. A small counter stretched across the room, carved with patterns I couldn't quite recognize. Behind it, shelves curved upward into shadow, filled with clocks of every kind. Pocket watches, tall standing ones, round wall pieces with hand-painted faces, some shaped like birds, others like moons. And then, behind the counter, a door. It looked like it hadn't been opened in years. I stepped forward, drawn by something I couldn't name, and just before I reached it, the door creaked inward, slowly. Not dramatically, just like it had been waiting. Beyond it, the air shifted. I stepped into a hallway of ivy and stone, where lanterns hung low and pulsed with a light that didn't flicker it breathe. The hallway curved softly, leading me past thick green walls woven with vines and herbs I hadn't smelled since childhood. Time didn't feel linear here. It folded gently. Each step slowed me, not with weight, but with welcome. When the hallway opened, I saw it. A garden unlike any I'd known. No paths, just soft, open ground dotted with wildflowers, benches, and raised beds filled not with vegetables or blooms, but with glimmers. Like stars had been planted here and grown into fragments of memory. In the center, beneath a wide-leaf tree, sat the clockmaker. You wouldn't notice him at first. He was part of the place, the way wind is part of trees. Old, yes, but not tired. He looked up at me with eyes that didn't ask questions, only made room for them. "You've come to find an hour," he said, gently patting the bench beside him. "One you lost, or forgot, or maybe one that never had a name." I sat. I didn't speak, and neither did he, not for a while. The garden didn't need words. It only needed presence. You're still here with me, aren't you? Let your breath settle now. You don't have to understand everything all at once. This is the beginning, not the answer. You've done enough today. It's okay to be quiet now. Just stay. Let the garden begin. The bench beneath me was smooth, worn in a way that only patient use could shape. It didn't creak. It didn't shift. It accepted me like it had accepted hundreds before, without judgment, without rush. The clockmaker said nothing for a long while, and neither did I. Around us, the garden moved slowly, if at all. Breezes wandered through with no urgency, touching leaves and drifting away again. Petals opened, not in response to light or time, but to quiet. I looked out and saw that each section of the garden held its own atmosphere. A patch to the left shimmered faintly with dew, even though no clouds moved above it. Another far off in the distance glowed with warm afternoon sun, even as the rest of the garden swayed in dusk. It was like every moment of time was given its own corner, allowed to grow without being uprooted. Most people, the clockmaker said at last, his voice steady and worn like old oak, don't know they've lost hours. They don't disappear. They just go unkept, like fallen leaves never swept from a doorstep. He turned something over in his hand, a piece of brass, small and round. But they can be found, or grown again. It's what this garden is for. I followed his gaze to a nearby bed where small markers rose from the soil. Each one bore a phrase, not a number. The morning she first felt understood. The last time he danced, when no one was watching. The hour she forgave herself. I knelt beside the bed and reached out, not to pick, but to feel. The soil was warm, living, and beneath it, something pulsed, faintly a heartbeat, or maybe just a reminder. Yours is here, he said, not pointing but watching. It doesn't look the same for everyone, but it knows when you're near. I rose slowly and wandered past the markers, reading each one silently. They weren't labeled with names, just moments. Moments that belonged to someone and now bloomed for them to visit again. And as I walked, one flower tilted toward Minot, brightly colored, not grand, just simple, pale, like morning fog lifting over water. I sat beside it. I didn't know what it meant, not yet, but it felt familiar, the way some dreams feel more like places you've been than stories you've imagined. The clockmaker stayed behind. He didn't follow. He didn't need to. This part was mine, and maybe yours too. You're still here, right? You don't have to rush. You can let your thoughts rest now. Let the stillness press gently around you. You are not behind, not forgotten. You are exactly where you're meant to be. The flower didn't open, not yet. It just leaned a little closer, like it was listening. And so I leaned in too, not with words, but with breath. And I waited, while the hour I had once lost began slowly, gently to remember me. I stayed beside the flower for a long time, not speaking, not expecting, just listening to the quiet language it seemed to hum into the space between us. The petals, pale as breath, didn't open, but shifted slightly in the windless air, as if testing the weight of recognition. The ground beneath me was warm not from sun, but from something steadier, as if the soil itself remembered the moment I was here for, and was holding it gently until I was ready to feel it. Around me, the garden carried on with its slow work. In one corner, vines adjusted themselves along a wooden trellis with a soft patience of someone smoothing a blanket. In another, a cluster of pale purple bells swung just enough to let their glassy chimes whisper through the air. The clockmaker was nowhere in sight now, and I didn't miss him. Not because he wasn't kind, but because the garden had become enough like a story that doesn't need narration to be understood. I let my fingers brush the edge of the flower's stem and felt something inside me soften, not a memory exactly, but a feeling, a sense that I had once been here before, in another form, or perhaps in another hour. Something about the stillness around me felt like home I had forgotten I ever lived in. And still, the flower didn't bloom. Not yet. It was waiting for something I hadn't given. Not a gesture, not a thought, just presence. So I closed my eyes and I breathed. Not to summon anything, not to change what was, just to arrive more fully. And in that moment, it happened not loudly, not all at once, but slowly. One petal lifted, then another. Inside was no light, no secret, no perfect answer, just color. A warm golden blush at the center, soft and steady. And in the space between its folds, I saw something I hadn't remembered in years. My hands, younger, clumsy, but steady, reaching for nothing, just reaching. And the sound of a song unrecorded, unimportant, but whole. It wasn't a moment I had thought to miss, but there it was, rising like steam from warm tea, gentle and unasked for. The flower pulsed faintly, and I felt it then, not the memory itself, but the way it had lived inside me, even while forgotten. I stayed like that for a while, eyes closed, hand resting near the soil, listening not for answers, but for alignment. Are you still breathing with me? Good. That's all I ask. Let yourself soften. Let this moment hold you. You don't need to understand every step of the way forward. Just be here. That's enough. More than enough. The garden doesn't demand arrival, it celebrates return. When I opened my eyes again, the flower had fully opened. The stem had straightened. The space around me had warmed. The air was thicker. Not in weight, but in peace. I stood slowly, the way one rises from a comfortable seat, not out of obligation, but readiness. And I turned to see a new archway grown into the wall of vines. A path that hadn't been there before now stretched beyond it, marked not by stone, but by glowing seed pods nestled into the ground like stars dropped into moss. I didn't wonder where it led. I simply stepped forward, because something there not urgent, but certain, was waiting to meet me next. The seed-lit path curved gently beneath my feet, each step soft and certain, the way a lullaby would sound if it had a texture. The air grew cooler as I walked, not cold, just enough to feel like evening after a long day, when everything slows and stretches into hush. The vines overhead parted as I moved, never snapping or rustling, just unfolding, like they trusted me to pass through without rush. I began to notice the sound again, not ticking, but the low, rounded pulse of passing hours echoing through the roots and leaves. It wasn't uniform. It didn't count. It simply existed, like breath. As I rounded a bend, the garden changed again. The plants here were shorter, wide-leafed and velvet soft, each one holding something within it. A stone, a folded scrap of cloth, a small feather, a piece of string, objects that didn't mean anything until you looked at them long enough, and then suddenly meant everything. I knelt by one and saw a tiny wooden button nestled into its center-rolled plane worn smooth by years of use. I didn't need to be told what it was. I remembered it from a sweater I had long outgrown, passed along to someone else, but kept in memory because of a single hour I had spent wearing it, on a bench, in rain, laughing without knowing why. These weren't objects. They were anchors, moments given form. This part of the garden wasn't about finding. It was about remembering that you hadn't lost anything at all. You'd just stopped carrying it. The plants shifted subtly as I passed, like a room full of friends nodding in recognition. Ahead, a clearing opened beneath a tree whose branches arched low, like arms forming a circle. At its center, a cushion sat beneath the canopy, and I sat there without hesitation. The moment I did, the tree released a single leaf, golden and wide, that drifted gently down and landed beside me. I held it, and inside its veins, I could see the shape of a moment I hadn't visited in years. A warm kitchen, the scent of baking, a humming voice not trying to be heard. It wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't sorrow. It was welcome. The tree had given it back to Minot to keep, but to remember. I let the leaf rest on the moss and closed my eyes again. And if you're still with me now, you can do the same. Let your jaw soften, let your shoulders drop. You've been holding yourself upright for so long. Let this place hold you instead. Let the memory come not as a burden, but as a warmth. This is your time, yours to rest, yours to breathe, yours to just be. When I opened my eyes, the tree had released another leaf smaller this time, shaped like a heart, or maybe just a folded hand, a small sign, a quiet yes. Beyond the clearing, another path emerged, this one winding upward along a low hill that shimmered faintly in the light of evening. I stood once more, not fully ready, but ready enough, and walked on. The hill rose in soft, deliberate curves, its path bordered by low hedges covered in silvery dew that never quite fell, but shimmered in place like a mist caught in thought. As I climbed, I noticed the ground changing again, not in color or shape, but in texture. Firmer now, more solid beneath my feet. The way things feel when you're finally approaching something that matters to you, even if you're not sure what it is. The light here was twilight soft, that honey-colored hush that touches everything equally and asks nothing in return. At the crest of the hill, the path widened into a small, open space where the world seemed to pause. No walls, no trees, just a round clearing wrapped in tall grass that swayed without wind. At the center sat a single chair, not ornate, just simple wood, shaped with care, as if it had been carved not for beauty but for understanding. I walked toward it slowly, each step quieter than the last. When I reached it, I didn't sit right away. I rested my hand along the top rail and felt the warmth it held not from sun, but from others, from those who had sat here before me, maybe only in spirit, maybe only in dreams. The chair held presence. It remembered. I lowered myself into it gently and let my breath catch up to me. The hilltop wasn't a viewpoint. It wasn't here to show you anything. It was here to remind you what it feels like to be held, without purpose, without expectation, I closed my eyes, and something inside me sighed. That long breath that lives just beneath all the others, the one that waits for silence. You're still here, aren't you? You're doing beautifully. Just breathe. You don't have to listen closely. You don't have to understand. Let the quiet wrap around your chest and remind you you are not behind. You are not late. You are simply here. And that is enough. For a long time, I didn't think. I just existed. The way leaves exist, the way light exists, without pressure, just presence. When I opened my eyes, I saw the garden below me, stretching out like a memory not yet finished. And just beyond the edge of the hill, another shape had appeared. A gate made of dark wood and curled vines, not open, not closed, just waiting. I stood from the chair and looked back once, not because I was leaving anything behind, but because I wanted to remember the way it felt, that stillness, that enoughness. I walked toward the gate and laid my hand against it. It warmed to the touch and opened on its own, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled downward into soft amber light. The air that rose from it smelled of old stories and fresh beginnings. I didn't hesitate. I stepped through. The staircase was narrow but not confining. It spiraled with grace. Each step made of smooth stone, worn just enough to feel safe underfoot, like hundreds of souls had passed before me in silence and reverence. The walls around me were a livenot, in the way a garden is full of motion, but in the way a melody lingers after the notes are gone. Vines ran down the curves, their leaves small and dark, breathing in rhythm with the pulse of the steps. Light came from somewhere low, tucked into the edges of the floor soft, golden, never flickering. The deeper I went, the quieter the world became, not because sound vanished, but because it was being held. Even the air felt like it had been filtered through memory and gentleness, like something sacred was being preserved just beyond my reach. After a long, slow descent, the stairs opened into a circular chamber, not grand, not sacred, just still. The walls were lined with shelves, and the shelves held clocks, not ticking ones, not broken ones. These were clocks, paused in the middle of something. Each one showed a different hour, but the hands hovered just above the face, not touching, as if time had been asked to hold its breath. At the center of the room sat a low table, round and worn, and on it a single clock. It was small, square, carved from dark wood, and its hands were missing. I sat beside it, resting my fingers on its surface, and felt warmth radiate from its core. Not heat, but recognition. This one was mine. Not because it was beautiful, but because it remembered me. It knew the hour I had come to reclaim, but it wouldn't hand it back, not like a key or a keepsake. I would have to receive it slowly, the way one receives understanding, not in words, but in quiet knowing. I closed my eyes and let my breath match the stillness around me, and in that silence I heard it, not ticking, but something softer, like fabric folding, like snow landing, like the echo of laughter you forgot was yours. You're still here with me, aren't you? Let this stillness sink into your spine. Let your eyelids be heavy if they wish. You're not meant to carry every moment. Some were always meant to be set down, just so you could find them again later here, in peace. The air thickened with a slow comfort, and when I opened my eyes again, the clock before me had changed. One hand had returned just one, gently curved, pointing not at a number but at a mark along the edge of the wood I hadn't seen before. It wasn't a time, it was a feeling, the exact shape of an hour I'd once lived and forgotten how to revisit. It pulsed faintly, steady as a heartbeat. I reached out, touched it gently, and in that moment I remembered. A quiet walk, a blue scarf, sunlight through leaves, and a thought I'd had that no one ever knew. It didn't change the world. It wasn't profound, but it was mine. I stood slowly, and every clock on the shelves around me released a single soft sound, not in unison, but like a wave of acknowledgement. I walked back toward the stairway, which now shimmered faintly like moonlight on water. I climbed, each step easier than the one before, as though the weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been placed gently down on that table. At the top, the gate stood open, waiting for me with the patience of a place that never questions why you return only welcomes that you did. The air outside the stairway was different now, not cooler, not warmer, just more awake. It met my skin like the memory of water, like something I hadn't touched in a long time but always loved. The garden greeted me not with sound, but with presence. The plants near the gate leaned slightly toward me. A tree with copper-colored leaves offered one gentle rustle. I walked through them slowly, and the path before me curved into a space I hadn't seen on the way in. This was a tucked-away corner of the garden, shaded beneath tall canopies, where everything grew a little closer together, like memories that hadn't quite been told yet. The light here was soft and filtered, slipping through leaves like warm breath between words. A bench sat at the center, cradled by vines that hadn't overtaken it, only framed it. I sat, and for a long moment I just looked. The garden didn't show me anything new. Instead, it seemed to wait for me to notice something already here. I let my eyes wander. A cluster of blue flowers near the edge, a stone path half covered by moss, a wind chime with no string, gently ringing. And then I felt it, a hum, low, not sound, but something deeper. Like my breath had synced with the gardens, and in that moment, I wasn't just a visitor, I was part of it. A keeper of forgotten hours, not just my own. The bench beneath me pulsed faintly, and beneath it, I noticed a single drawer, small, simple. I pulled it open, slowly, and inside was a folded note. No envelope, no seal. Just a paper aged at the corners, written in a hand I somehow recognized, my own. The words were few. This is the part where you forgive yourself. I stared at them for a long time, not to understand them, but to feel their weight. I didn't remember writing them, but I knew they were true. You're still with me, aren't you? Good. Let that line echo gently in your chest. You're not behind. You're not broken. And maybe tonight is not for answers, but for resting beside them. It's okay to put everything down, just for a little while, just long enough to breathe like the earth does. I folded the note again and placed it back in the drawer, not because I didn't want to keep it, but because I wanted it to stay here for the next person who needed it. I stood slowly, feeling my limbs move with ease I hadn't noticed before. The air smelled different now, familiar, like something had opened. Not a door, not a gate, just me. At the edge of this quiet corner, the clockmaker stood watching. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence was like the hour itself, steady, present, unhurried. He nodded once toward a final path, lit not by lanterns, but by the last glow of day. And I understood. There was just one more place to visit. Not an ending, not a return. Just the last bloom of the garden that remembered me. The final path wound itself through the low light like a ribbon in slow motion, resting lightly on the ground rather than pressing into it. The garden around me grew quieter, though it had never been loud, and I felt its stillness begin to fold gently inward, the way a page turns itself when the wind is soft. I didn't rush. Each step felt earned, not through effort, but through presence. The air here had changed. It was fuller, touched by something like gratitude. The plants grew taller, narrower, shaped like prayers spoken without words. The path ended at a wide circle of earth, untouched by footfall, where the sky above was clearer than it had been all night. Stars blinked through the canopy, distant and close at once. In the center of the circle stood a tall clock, unlike any I'd seen. It wasn't made of wood or brass or stone. It looked almost like glass. But when I stepped close, I saw it wasn't solid. It was woven. Woven from threads of light and shadow and breath. It held no hands, no ticking parts, just a faint pulse, like a heartbeat waiting to be noticed. The clockmaker was beside it now, his hands folded, his expression the kind that holds both welcome and farewell in the same breath. "You don't need to understand it," he said softly. "You've already lived it." I nodded, not needing to speak. This was the hour I hadn't even known I was missing, the one that wasn't marked on a face or kept in a drawer. It was the hour of becoming, of remembering who I was beneath every version I'd had to be. I stepped into the circle and placed my palm on the woven surface. It gave just slightly, like warm cloth, and the moment I touched it, the garden pulsed around me. Not loudly, not brightly, just enough to say, "We saw you, we held you, you were never lost." Not really. I closed my eyes, and in that space, I felt not a single moment, but many, woven together. Hours I'd set down in worry, in distraction, in exhaustion. Hours I'd skipped over in the rush to be more. All of them here now, whole again. You're still here with me, aren't you? Let that mean something. Let this moment wash gently over whatever you've carried today. Let it smooth the corners. Let it slow the pace. You've done enough. You are enough. You can rest now. When I opened my eyes again, the woven clock shimmered once and faded not, disappeared, just softened. The garden was quiet, not asleep, just content. I turned slowly and saw the path back. Not the one I came in on, but a new one lit by soft lanterns that bobbed ever so slightly, as if breathing. I walked with no weight. The air hummed. And when I passed through the final gate, the blue door of the shop stood waiting, half open. I stepped through it, and the clocks on the walls greeted me with one soft, shared breath of sound, not ticking, just time. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The garden came with Menot in my pocket, not in my hand. but in the way I now carried each moment forward, slow and whole. The door closed behind me. The street was quiet, but inside me, something had begun again. Thank you for walking through the garden with me tonight. I hope, in some small way, it helped you slow down, maybe even find a little piece of time you didn't know you'd lost. If this story brought you comfort, or calm, or simply helped you rest, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Your presence here means more than you know. And if you'd like to return again when the world feels loud, or the hours feel heavy, you're always welcome to like, subscribe, and come back to this quiet corner. Until next time, breathe easy, rest deeply, and remember, some hours are only found when we slow down enough to feel them. Good night.